Whoa, 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 whoa. They wouldn't bow to an idol. They wouldn't bend a knee, no. And in the desert, Nebuchadnezzar send us the Hebrew 3. And for their stand they were taken. They'd face the furnace fire, 7 times hotter than it had been. Yet the soldiers threw them in. There was a 4th man in the flame. Everybody watching, they were amazed when Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, they came out of the fire and didn't even smell of smoke. Whoa, 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 whoa. There will be days when we're tested, tempted to compromise. But just remember that trial you're in, the Lord is with you just like when there was a 4th man in the flame. Everybody watching, they were amazed when Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, they came out of the fire and didn't even smell the smoke. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
What's up, Harbor.Church? Happy Sunday. We're so glad you're here. Whether you're tuning in from your couch, maybe you're getting some fresh air, wherever you are, we're happy you're here. My name is Elizabeth Thompson. My husband Mike and I lead a Connect group on Friday nights. We have them every night of the week. It's all through Zoom, so anyone, anywhere can tune in, get some fellowship, have a conversation with another person, even through a screen. It helps you feel not so isolated. We're all at home right now during this time, and we know church doesn't look like it used to, and we know people are really missing that community, but we still have lots of ways to stay connected, guys. Go to Harbor.Church.com, click on that COVID-19 banner up top, and you'll see a drop down of all the resources. I highly recommend you sign up for the daily directionals. Just plug in your email. You don't have to go to Harbor for this. And every single morning, you're gonna get sent a short devotional, and it's just such a great way to keep your mind focused on God. He's got this, He knows the outcome. He's with us along this journey, and it's just so nice to be able to get your mindset right for the day. We also have nightly prayers every single night at 8:28 p.m. on Facebook Live and Instagram Live. These are so fun, you guys. Comment below, everyone who tunes in. It's a blast to be a part of that community. We've got random guest appearances, we've got food, we have trivia nights. They're just a blast. Come get some community, come get filled up, and then we pray together and we just lift up everything, all of our worries, all of just everything that's going on right now. It's so nice to be together during this time, even though we're physically apart. And then we also have ways that you can ask for help. So if you're someone who is unable to get out and get groceries, maybe you're just not comfortable going out and get groceries, someone to pick up your trash, anything like that, guys, we've got you covered. We just don't know about the need unless you sign up for it. So head on to Harbor.Church.com, click on that banner, you'll scroll down and you'll see where you can ask for help. You can also volunteer if you're someone who's able to get out and do these errands and do these things for other people. We'd love to get you guys connected so that we can serve as many people as we can during this time. Also, one of my favorite resources on there is the Harbor Kids resources. They have lessons, videos, coloring pages. Guys, my kids love this. I print out the coloring pages and they will sit there and actually color. Now, I have boys. I have 3 boys, 6 and under, or under 6, sorry. He's not even 6 yet. It takes a lot to get them to sit still. I love these lessons. They get so into it, and it's something that we really enjoy in our house. If you've got little ones, I highly recommend checking that out. Anyway, so we're getting ready to get started. Grab your coffee, grab your tea, whatever you want. Sit back and relax, and we'll get going.
Today, Pastor Josh is going to be preaching out of a passage in the Bible that talks about a king named Nebuchadnezzar and 3 young fellas named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And if you have no idea what I just said, you're not alone. There are all kinds of very strange names in the Bible, and we all fumble our way through them and pretend like we know what we're talking about. So we thought we'd do something a little fun today and ask some of our Harbor kids to see what they can do with those words and what kind of pronunciation they come up with. So check this out.
What are these?
Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar. That's another.
King Nebuchadnezzar.
King Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar. Shadrach. Shadrach. Shadrach.
Shadrach. Sander. Shadrach.
Shadrach.
Shadrach and Abednego. Shadrach and Abednego.
Meshach.
Meshach.
Meshach. Abednego. King Abednego.
Bingo.
King Nebuchadnezzar, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hand. From the moment that I wake
We are just about to get into the message, but before we do, we just want to take a second and celebrate the awesome thank you parade that we had just this past Wednesday. A ton of you guys came out. We gathered in our parking lot. We got together with a couple other local churches, decorated our cars, and just formed a big old caravan going around to local fire stations, police stations, and Cape Cod Hospital, just doing what we can from a distance to thank them for all of their hard work, show them that we love them. And I just want to thank you guys for coming out, for showing up, for being neighbors. And a very, very special thank you to all those people who are out there on the front lines, working hard every single day to keep us safe, to take care of our community. We can't thank you enough. And it was just such a blast to get together and still be apart and just show you guys some love. But that is not all we have going on. We've got another opportunity for you guys. If you're sitting at home and you're wondering how you can reach out to our community, we've been in touch with one of our neighbors just across the street at one of the local nursing homes. And as you may know, they're not able to get visitors right now. They're not able to see their family members or friends, grandkids. So they're hurting. They're a little bit lonely. So we spoke to them, and they said they would love both cards and videos from us. So if you want to get in on that, you can write a card, send it right here to Harbor.Church, or drop it in our mailbox. We're located at 957 Falmouth Road. We'll gather all those up and send them right to them. Or you can film a video right from your home. You can read them a story, read them a Bible story, sing them a song, do a baking lesson, or just say hello. Let them know you love them, that you're thinking of them. They would love anything, just some fresh faces to brighten their day. Let them know that we at Harbor are thinking about them. We're praying for them, we love them, and we care. Even if we can't be there physically, we want them to know that we're here for them, even from a distance. So I definitely encourage you guys, get in on that. Anytime before next Sunday, that's the deadline to get in those cards or videos. And the videos can be sent to info@Harbor.Church.com. And again, the cards can come right here to 957 Falmouth Road. And just help us do our part to love our community. And we love you guys. We are going to get into the message, so let's do it.
All right, well, good morning, man. Welcome to Harbor.Church. If you're new and this is your first time in a long time, my name is Josh Adams. I'm the pastor of Harbor.Church, and I'm so thrilled that you're with us. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being a part of what we're doing as we kind of do church online, and we try to take today's message and bring it to you wherever you're at. Maybe you're watching at home. Maybe you're listening to the podcast. Maybe you're checking this out weeks from now on Vimeo or one of the other archives. We're just glad that you're able to be a part of this service and listen in as we talk about what it means to be brave and how to find your brave. We've done a few weeks on this subject, and I think it's very fitting that this is the time that we are tackling this subject, as everything around us seems to be so intense and so scary for a lot of people. How do we find our brave? How do we show courage? How do we step up and be bold when it seems like everybody else is freaking out, or everybody else has fears that are mounting, or things seem to be going in a heavy direction for, maybe it has nothing to do with coronavirus. Maybe your fear or your struggle is for a relationship that's crumbling. Maybe it's for your finances, as you're not sure what the next paycheck's going to look like or how you're going to cover the next bill. Maybe it's for something with your health, and you're not sure if you're ever going to be able to recover, or what the next doctor diagnosis is going to look like. As we tackle things, God has called us to step out and to trust Him and to have courage and have a bravery about us that speaks as a testimony to the people that see us. But how do we do that? I think one of the coolest stories that we will ever talk about in the Bible is the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who step into the limelight of the Bible as far as miracles go when they survive being thrown into a fiery furnace. Maybe you've heard this story, maybe you never have. It's found in the Old Testament, in the book of Daniel. And the summary of it is there's these three guys who won't do what everybody else is doing, and the punishment for going against the crowd, for going against the king, is that they're executed by being thrown into a giant fire. The cool part of the story is not just their bravery, but it's the miracle that takes place when they don't die in the fire. But before we get to that, before we get to the cool story of the miracle in Daniel chapter 3, there's a little bit of backstory that I think you should know about these guys. First off, they were slaves. They were captured. If you go look at Daniel chapter 1, you can go read this on your own. At the beginning of the chapter, it talks about King Nebuchadnezzar invades their land and captures a lot of the people. Of course, he's going to take the gold and the artifacts that were precious, but he also takes the brightest minds that Israel had. He takes the strongest people to be slaves. He takes the smartest people to work for him. And these guys are part of that group. So he took anybody who was noble, anybody who had any value to him. And along the way, their goal was when they captured young people. And it says that Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel, who authors this, they were all very young men when they were captured. We don't know how old they are, but they were considered young men when they were taken out of their home and made to be slaves for King Nebuchadnezzar. The king picks a group of them, and then he says, I want these guys to serve in my court. And he assigns his chief of staff, and you can read this on your own. In verse number 3, there's a guy named Ashpenaz who is responsible for making the king's future court, these advisors, he's responsible for getting them in shape. And so one of the things he does in verse number 7, it says that the chief of staff renames them with these Babylonian names. He takes Daniel, who was called and named him Belteshazzar. He takes Hananiah and he renames him Shadrach. He takes Mishael and he names him Meshach. And then he takes Azariah and he calls him Abednego. That might not be a big deal to you. You might think, oh, well, they got conquered. They got moved from Israel to Babylonia. That might be they just need a Babylonian name. But you got to understand, their Hebrew names had to do with the worship of their God. Their Hebrew names paid tribute to the God that they served, the one true God. Well, the Babylonians don't believe in that God. The Babylonians had their own system of worship, very pagan. They actually worshiped Nebuchadnezzar as a god. They worshiped a lot of humans as gods on earth. They had other false gods that they would bow down to. They worship a lot of gods. They definitely didn't believe in having one true God as the Hebrews did, or the Israelites. So when they renamed them, what they're doing is they're trying to subtly pull them away from their belief system, slowly begin to indoctrinate them with the Babylonian mindset, with this culture that says, things are better here. We beat you guys, so we must be smarter. We must be stronger. Why don't you come to our side? Why don't you begin to lean into what it means to be like us? Do you guys see the parallel to today? When we begin to talk about what it looks like to be brave, let's just open up our minds for a second and just let's not be dumb sheep. Let's not be naive to what's going on around us. Satan has always wanted you and I to just follow along with the things that seem easy, that seem very, very natural, just like, oh, this is what everybody else is doing. And what it is a slow path away from God. If you're a believer, if you're following after God, and I recognize that not everybody watching and everybody listening right now, you may not know if you believe in God. You may be listening to this trying to figure out if you should start a relationship with Christ. I hope you'll make that decision. That's the most important decision you'll ever make. But if you have already made that decision, then understand that Satan wants you to walk away from God. He wants you to leave your faith behind. This is, in a very subtle way, what the Babylonians were trying to do to these young Hebrew men. And it reminds me of a verse in Colossians chapter 2, and I think this is a good verse for us to remember. And in Colossians chapter 2, verse number 8, it says, don't let anyone capture you with empty philosophies and high-sounding nonsense. They come from human thinking and from spiritual powers of this world. But what we want is we'd rather have stuff that comes from Christ. This is a cool verse. Now you got to remember, this is written to the church at Colossae. This is this is a New Testament verse, thousands of years after Daniel. And we see that they're being told not to let anyone capture you. Well, these guys in Colossians, they're slaves. They're under the rule of the Roman Empire. The people we're talking about, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're slaves and have been captives of the Babylonian Empire. So they've already been captured. It's written to people, unlike you and I, these guys didn't have freedom, but it's not talking about their physical freedom. It's saying, don't let somebody enslave your mind. Don't let somebody have your heart. Don't let the parts of you that matter most, your mind, your soul, the things you believe, don't let them capture you with these dumb philosophies. I love that he says empty philosophies. This is what Paul's writing about. Stupid, high-sounding, dumb things, this nonsense. What does that look like today? It might be a dumb self-help book. It might be some worldly philosophy. It might be this cultural idea of this is how we do it. It's false religions that teach you to just worship dumb things or to believe in dumb things. These philosophies, these false ideas, they're looking to steal your mind, to capture your heart, to pull you away from God. And we're told to be on guard against them. Everything around us, the world around us, is designed to teach us to want to be greedy, to want us to be self-focused, to want us to be selfish, to want us to look out for ourselves, to want us to want the best for only us. Our pride, our arrogance, our lust, our greed, our jealousy, all of these things come because we serve us. And that's what the world tells us. That's the number one philosophy today. You look out for you. When Jesus came, he said the new philosophy, the way he wants his believers to go, is love God first and then love others more than you love yourself. This reorganizes things. The young men, Daniel and those three guys, they're being asked to eat a bunch of the king's food and asked to eat a bunch of this like exotic food, the meat and wine that King Nebuchadnezzar was offering these guys. He was telling them, you have to eat it. And it says in verse number 8 that Daniel determined in his heart not to defile himself. I love this. Determined not to defile himself. He was committed that he wasn't going to indulge in that. And also the other three guys, those Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they decided, we're not eating the meat, we're not eating the lavish food, we're not going to go down that road, because that was part of that, drawing them in, teaching them to go after what their flesh craved. What our sin nature, you and I, we naturally want to have more. We are naturally designed to look out for us, to go for the things that seem fun or appealing or cool or easy. If they were being asked to eat a bunch of garbage, if they brought in pig slop and said, please eat this, it wouldn't have been a big deal for Daniel and those guys to go, no thanks, we'll pass. They were passing on the delicacies. They were passing on the nicest, the best of the best, because what the Babylonians were doing, they were offering that meat to idols. They were using that as almost like propaganda of how great they have and how good they are. And if these guys had begun to indulge in that, what they would have done is they would have been going against what God's best for them was. And what I'm trying to encourage you today is that may look different than the food that they were offered, but I'm guessing that the temptation to go after what the world offers is still very strong. For some of you, it's one more drink. It's let me go to one more pornography site. It's let me say one more angry word and win this argument. It's let me give in to just a little bit of hate because of what they did to me. It's that frustration. It's that let me pursue this raise at all costs, and it doesn't matter who I have to step on. It may be, man, I'm gonna wrap my life around all the friends, the likes, the popularity that I can get, so I feel valued by other people's opinions. Who knows what it is? But for each of us, we're all pulled towards certain things that bring us down this road. This is what 1 John chapter 2, verse 15 through 17 says. Do not love this world nor the things that it offers you. Once again, I don't know what you're being offered. I don't know what you're being tempted with. But the world is going to tempt you with whatever it can that gets you to trust in you and go after you and what you want more than you go after what God wants for you. Real bravery is going to be to step back and go, I don't need this. I want it, but I don't need it. God, you know what I need. You give me what I need. I don't go out and get what I want. And that's a complete shift in our mindset. As we learn to lean into that, we're going to have to say, I'm not going after the things of this world, what it offers me. When I love the world, I don't have the love of the Father in me. And then it goes on to say, the world offers only a craving for physical pleasure. How true is that? The more you feed your physical pleasure, the more it grows. A craving for everything we see, a pride in achievements and possessions. Of course, look what I got. Look what I did. How many people were hoarding toilet paper, for crying out loud? We'll get greedy about toilet paper, let alone all the other stuff. These are not from the Father. They're from this world. The world teaches us to be greedy and to be selfish like that. That comes naturally to us. So we have to push back against that. We're talking about self-denial, self-discipline. That struggle is to think less of yourself. I'm not talking about just putting yourself down. You're not as awesome as you think you are. Some of you may need to think less of yourself in that way. But I mean, think of yourself less often. Like, quit thinking about what you want. Start thinking about what do other people around me want. This is what Daniel and these men had to do early on, was to learn self-control, learn self-discipline. It pays big dividends for them, both with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego with the fiery furnace, and Daniel, who later on gets thrown into a lion's den. They had to be able to discipline themselves to do the hard thing. If it's easy, it's not self-discipline. This is what it says in Titus chapter 2, and I want you to see this. Titus chapter 2, verses 11 and 12 say this: "For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all people." Sweet. What do we do with that salvation? It's training us to renounce ungodliness. I can get behind that. Don't want to be ungodly. I can do that. How do we do that? Oh, and worldly passions. Okay. And to live self-controlled, self-discipline. To live upright and godly lives in this present age. Do you remember the fruits of the Spirit from Galatians 5? Galatians 5, verses 22 and 23 tell us all the different fruits of the Spirit that we're supposed to have. The very last one in verse number 23 says self-control. Out of all of them, love, joy, peace, kindness. The last one's self-control. This is how we know that we're following after God. This is a cool result. The Daniel and the three guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they actually passed this test of not eating all the bad food. They actually just eat vegetables and drink water, and they come out of it healthier and smarter, and God rewards them by elevating them in the king's court. They become officers and officials, and they become some of the top advisors to King Nebuchadnezzar. So they're blessed. They actually get to do more. They actually have more prominence. And that actually is what sets up chapter 3. In chapter 3, these guys come into it needing to learn, or having learned just from chapter 1, this idea of putting back what they want. They've learned, okay, God, the more I die to myself, the more that you show up and intervene. So they could have just been slaves, but now they're like top officials. As we start chapter 3, I want you to start with Romans chapter 12. Romans chapter 12, verse number 1, tells us this: "Dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all he's done for you." What has he done for us? Well, he died for us on the cross to take away our sins. Because he's done that, let your bodies be a living and holy sacrifice. That seems like a contradiction. A sacrifice was to put something on an altar and to kill it, to sacrifice it, to give it to God. Well, we're supposed to be a living sacrifice. So what that's saying is every morning you get up and you die daily. You say, it's not what I want. It's not what I'm looking for. It's not what makes me happy. It's not what my flesh craves. It's what you want, God. And I want to be that kind of sacrifice. That's how we will find what's acceptable. This is the true way to worship God. This is something that a lot of us are missing out. But I want you to dig into what this verse is saying and what it's trying to get us to do. It's helping us to understand what Paul wrote to the church at Galatia in chapter 2. In Galatians chapter 2, he says, my old self has been crucified with Christ. It's not I who live. Once I've invited Jesus into my life, once I've surrendered that I'm not the one in control, when I put my faith in God instead of myself, now I don't have to worry about, is Josh Adams a good enough dad? Is he a good enough husband? Is he a good enough friend? Is he a good enough boss? Is he a good enough son? Is he good? I'm not good enough. Eventually, I'm going to find things that I fall short at, and I'm going to screw up, and I'm going to mess up, and I do that a lot. But I don't have to worry about like how many answers do I have and how great can I be? Because my bravery doesn't come, my courage can't come from me trusting in me. It's knowing that it's not I who live, it's Christ who lives in me. So I live in this earthly body by trusting the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. I can live on this earthly body. I can face earthly fires and furnaces and public peer pressure and all of that by trusting in the Son of God. Where I trust allows me to live differently. I can live self-disciplined, self-controlled. I can learn to let go of my flesh because I'm not trusting in myself. I don't have to trust. If all you are is you're the only hope that you have, you're going to feed yourself, you're going to promote yourself, you're going to push yourself, you're going to get everything for you because you are all your hope. But when you stop being your only hope, You don't have to get all of the popularity that you think you need. You don't have to get all the material possessions that you think you need. You don't have to get all the pats on the back or the acclamation that you think you need. You can go, hey, it's not about me. I've got God who's living through me. And it's exemplified, and this is the part I really want to draw your attention to. Luke chapter 9, verse number 23. If you have a Bible, you can turn there. If not, I'm going to put this on the screen for you. And this is Jesus talking. He's talking to a big crowd of people. He says, listen, if any of you guys want to be my follower, and they're all like, we're following you, Jesus, we're following you. He says, if you really want to be one of my followers, you must turn from your selfish ways. That's that self-control. So show some self-control. Don't go after what you want. Take up your cross daily and follow me. Take up your cross. Once again, self-sacrifice. Die daily. But that's the part I want you to focus on. I've heard a lot of people say, pick up your cross and follow me. Pick up your cross and follow me. They leave out daily. Why? Because we don't want to do it every day. We want to do it occasionally when it's easy. And I'm watching people like, yeah, I did something great today. And then they live off of that one moment of doing something nice, of being Christ-like for a few minutes. And then they brag about it and live off of it for the next 2 months. They want to medal. You want to pat yourself on the back. You're like, look what I did. I didn't royally kill somebody today or screw up. I was kind of nice for 5 minutes. Woo, look at me. And then we want to promote it and pass it on, talk about it. Like, look at what I did. It's every day. You're supposed to be doing that all the time. You're not supposed to be a total turd all the time. And when the few minutes when you're actually nice, get all excited about it. Don't throw yourself a party. Instead, stop being a turd all the time. That's the nicest word I can think of right now, okay? A lot of people acting like total jackwagons, and then when they do something kind, they want all of the credit for it. And Jesus says, every day you're supposed to be more like me and less like yourself. This is what these guys are learning. They're learning to exemplify trusting in him. So in Daniel chapter 3, we see that the King Nebuchadnezzar builds this giant statue, and he wants everybody to come and worship it. In Daniel chapter 3, he says, everybody's got to come and bow down to this statue. When the music plays, everybody drops to the ground, and they worship this giant statue that King Nebuchadnezzar built because it would make him feel good about himself, and it would show their loyalty to him. He brings all of his officials. That means Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. All these leaders, they come, and the music plays, and these guys drop down. Everybody drops down except for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're just kind of standing there like, God told us not to worship anybody but him. We ain't worshiping Nebuchadnezzar, and we ain't worshiping his idol. Everybody else hits the ground. You don't have to worry about will you stand out. In today's society, when you don't do what the world does, don't worry. It's going to be noticeable. People are like, I don't know if I can have a testimony. I don't know if I can make a difference. Just stop being like all the other dead fish floating downstream. If you have some life to you, some courage to you, and you go against the stream, you're going to stand out. Those guys drop to the ground. There's 3 dudes standing out in the middle of this plain like, okay. It was very obvious. The guys who were jealous of them because of all the blessings that God had put on them because they were obedient to God, go and tell on them. King Nebuchadnezzar, you can read the story at the beginning of chapter 3. King Nebuchadnezzar, did you notice that those guys didn't bow? We thought we love you and we bowed, but those guys didn't. We all had one of those classmates, right? The kid who's like, excuse me, teacher, didn't you say we were going to have a pop quiz today? Or didn't you say we're going to have a quiz or a test today? And, I noticed that you haven't given us that test. And you're sitting over there going, shut up. These guys were those kind of people that just trying to get them in trouble. And they do. They get Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in trouble. It says that Nebuchadnezzar, in verse number 13 of Daniel chapter 3, Nebuchadnezzar flew into a rage and ordered that they get brought to him. And you got to understand, he was so consumed about people fearing him that he builds this giant fiery furnace. And he builds this furnace because he wants people to be afraid not to worship this idol. So it's out on this big plain, so it's out in the wilderness, so that there's room for thousands of people to gather around. And there's this giant statue, and then there's this giant fiery furnace pit to throw people into. So you could see what you were supposed to do, and then you saw the consequences if you didn't. And it was meant to be this easy decision. Do what everybody else does. Everybody else was so afraid of the fire that they just bowed down to whatever they were told to bow down to. Now, this is going to preach a lot for where we're at right now. What do you get out of this? Do you understand how the story parallels today? When everybody else is freaking out, when everybody else is so intimidated and so going with the flow, if everybody else is going to bow, I'm going to bow. Everybody is just so eager to not have the thing that's so scary happen to them that they just did whatever's put out there, what everybody else does. What God's called you and I to do is take a real step of bravery and not act like everybody else. But in order for you to appreciate how brave they were, I think you need to appreciate how scary the fire was. I've asked John Petty, who does a lot of teaching for us. He does our Rooted Nights, and he's been a huge blessing to us. I've asked him to shoot a little video and kind of help us maybe wrap our heads around the fire and why Nebuchadnezzar did it that way. So take a look at this.
Welcome to our fire. This is probably a little bit smaller than the fire that we see recorded in Daniel from this fiery furnace. You know, not a lot is known about the fiery furnace as far as its actual construction that we can see, but there's a few parts of the passage that we can glean from that can teach us a little bit about it. One, it's probably, again, we don't know for certain, but it was probably an open pit, much like this one, but dug down a little bit deeper into the ground, because it talks about how they were brought down into the mouth of the furnace. And it was set up in front of all the people so they could see it. So you can remember King Nebuchadnezzar had set up this structure that he had built, this golden image for people to come and to worship. And for those who would oppose him or oppose his order, there was the furnace. That was also a visible reminder to intimidate the people to get them to follow. You know, when we see the story, we can also see more likely that it was open because he had built this fiery furnace so hot that when he escorted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego down into the fire, he had ordered it 7 times hotter, and it was so hot, in fact, that those guards literally died as they brought him closer and closer to the fire. I can tell you, even being this close to the fire, how hot it is, and how much, even as great as a job as this fire is, how much stronger and hotter that must have been. And what a real picture of intimidation it must have been for all the people. They could probably, more than likely, feel the heat even amongst the crowd, even if they weren't even that close to it. And we know they can look down into it from what we can see from King Nebuchadnezzar himself, who literally calls them out when we know the end of the story is there. You know, unlike a lot of forms of punishment, we're pretty good at that as humans, coming up with creative ways to kill and execute people. The thing about this story that always strikes me is this fiery furnace that they built. There's like zero margin for error here in a way of execution. You know, with animals and the things that come into play that we see with, like even in hangings, a rope could break, or in other instruments that we've used, there could be mechanical failures. Or even the case where we put Daniel in a lion's den, well, maybe the lion wasn't that hungry that day. Maybe he had a sick stomach. But when you get escorted down into a fiery furnace, there's really no margin for error there. That fire is burning, it's hot, you can feel the heat before you get there, and then it's over. It's just a real reminder to the people constantly of what would happen if they had disobeyed their king.
Man, thank you, John, for that. And he hit that nail right on the head. I think King Nebuchadnezzar wanted nothing more than intimidation. That fire was a surefire way. It was a guaranteed way to make sure that any offenders were killed. So it looked like 100% death rate. Nobody's going to walk out of that fire. He made the fire so hot that the soldiers who throw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the fire, the soldiers that threw them in died just from being so close to that heat. That's how powerful that fire was. They throw them in fully clothed. Here's the cool end of the story. Nebuchadnezzar, he looks out at the men, the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego he throws in the fire, and he's like, hey, dude, didn't we throw 3 guys in? Why do I see 4 guys? And this is where we pick up in the story in verse number 25. Look, Nebuchadnezzar shouted, I see 4 men unbound walking around in the fire unharmed. And the 4th looks like a god, because it was the Son of God. It was an angel of God that God had sent to rescue Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Verse number 26. Then Nebuchadnezzar came as close as he could to the door of the flaming furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stepped out of the fire. Then the high officers, the officials, the governors, and all the rest, basically the guys who told on him, they all gathered around, they crowded around him, and they saw that the fire had not touched them. They didn't come out with blisters. They didn't come out with burnt clothes. It goes on to say this, not a hair on their heads was singed. I can't even barbecue hamburgers in my backyard without burning my eyebrows. These guys go through the fiery furnace and not a hair on their head was touched. Their clothing wasn't scorched. And I love this part. They didn't even smell of smoke. How cool is it that the very thing that everybody else was so afraid of, that it was going to consume them, it was going to destroy them, not only did these guys not die, they don't even get hurt. So they don't die, they don't get hurt, they don't get third-degree burns, first-degree burns, they don't even get blisters, they don't even get a tan, okay? Not only that, it doesn't even burn their possessions. Their clothes don't even feel the effect of the fire. And not only that, they don't even smell of smoke. There isn't even a residual after effect. They walk through the very thing. I want you to hear this today, because I'm not talking about this fiery furnace like in the physical way. I want you to understand this. These followers of God stood up to the very thing that everybody else panicked about, the very thing that everybody else freaked out about. They went right into the heart of it, and they came right out of it. And they were undamaged, unhurt. Their stuff wasn't even there, and they didn't even smell of smoke. Hours later, they were sitting around hanging out with some of those other officials, and those guys are looking at them, and they couldn't even smell that they had been in the fire. Bobby and John shot that video, and for the next couple of days, they smelled like smoke just from being around a bonfire for a few minutes. Can you imagine having been in it? And I'm not trying to emphasize a weird point. I want you to understand, God protected them so much from the very thing that everybody else just quickly bowed their knee to. God protected them to the point that nothing affected them, not even the after effects, not even the residual stuff. I thought that was really cool. As we look and celebrate this story, I'm reminded of someone else who preached on this very same passage at a different time, when standing up and doing the right thing, even though everybody else is too afraid and even though everybody else goes with the flow. I thought it was a very, very appropriate message for where we're at today and what's going on, as well as knowing what was going on when he preached it. So this is a message, just a small little snippet of a message from Martin Luther King, where he preached at, I want to mess that up, but I think it's Abednego.Church. And he preached this message 5 months before he was assassinated. And man, I thought it was very powerful as he broke apart this message from Daniel chapter 3. He emphasizes the part of Daniel where King Nebuchadnezzar, before he throws him in the fire, King Nebuchadnezzar tries to intimidate him one more time. And he says, guys, I'm going to throw you in this fire if you don't bow down. And their response in verse number 16 was, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we're thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power, your majesty. But even if he doesn't, we want to make clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue that you set up. The beginning of verse 18 there, my translation says, but even if he doesn't. There's other versions that say, but if not, like, hey, God's going to rescue us, but if not, but even if he doesn't, we're going to do the right thing. And Martin Luther King preached an entire message off of this phrase right here, but even if God doesn't rescue us, we're still doing it. We want him to, but our courage and our bravery doesn't come from God doing what we want. It comes from us doing what God's called us to do and knowing that however it works out, it's what he wants. So listen to this, and then we'll close.
Ultimately, you must do right because it's right to do right. You got to say, but if not. You must love ultimately because it's lovely to love. You must be just because it's right to be just. You must be honest because it's right to be honest. This is what this text is saying more than anything else. And finally, you must do it because it has gripped you so much that you are willing to die for it if necessary. And I say to you this morning, that if you have never found something so dear and so precious to you that you will die for it, then you aren't fit to live. Make it plain. Make it plain. You may be 38 years old as I happen to be. And one day some great opportunity stands before you and calls upon you to stand up for some great principle, some great issue, some great cause. And you refuse to do it because you are afraid. You refuse to do it because you want to live longer. You're afraid that you will lose your job, or you're afraid that you will be criticized, or that you will lose your popularity. Are you afraid that somebody will stab you or shoot at you or bomb your house? And so you refuse to take the stand. Well, you may go on and live until you are 90, but you're just as dead at 38 as you would be at 90. And the cessation of breathing in your life is but the belated announcement of an earlier death of the spirit. You died when you refused to stand up for right. You died when you refused to stand up for truth. You died when you refused to stand up for justice. These boys stand before us today, and I thank God for them, for they had found something. The fiery furnace couldn't stop them from believing it. And they said, throw us into the fiery furnace. Yes, sir. But you know, the interesting thing is, the Bible talks about a miracle. Because they had faith enough to say, but if not, God was with them as an eternal companion.
I loved what Dr. King was saying there. This passion to do the right thing even when nobody else will, even though it may cost you something. And if you choose not to do the right thing because you think somehow that helps you in the long run, he said, you know, as a 38-year-old choosing to do the wrong thing, he would be as dead as if he had lived a whole nother life after that. There's a life to doing what God's called us to do. When we step out in bravery and courage, man, how much more is it to be alive, to do what God's called us, than if we live in the safety of, oh, well, everybody else is doing this. Everybody else is making it comfortable. Man, it hit me. I'm 38 years old, and I listened to him preach as a 38-year-old, and I'm like, man, I loved it. I got a long way to go in becoming a speaker like that. I love that power. It got me energized just to go a whole nother message. But what I loved was the conviction and the urgency with which he spoke. You know, you've got to do it. And you step out and do the right thing. Even if God doesn't do what you want him to do, that's okay. Your faith doesn't come from God doing your plan. You've already surrendered control. And so you don't have to hope in what you want. You just have to put your hope in a God who's got everything worked out for good. It's hard for us to see that, and that's where our faith grows when we don't see the good. But our faith grows because we're not hoping in ourselves. It really is summarized in this last verse, and this is a weird verse if you don't understand the context. In 2 Corinthians, this is what it says in chapter 3, verse number 12. We have such hope, because since we have such hope, we are very bold. You have to know what the chapter 3 is talking about, and I don't have time to read it all to you. It's basically saying because of what Christ did for us and our belief in Jesus Christ and us surrendering our lives to him, that we have that kind of hope. And because that we have that kind of hope, we can be very bold. Our courage, our bravery doesn't have to come from inside of us. It comes from the one who modeled it for us, the one who took on the cross, took on Calvary, took on the crowds, took on peer pressure, beat death, came back to life, promises us a future life with him as long as we go forward in him. And so that's what I'm calling you to today. I'm asking you to make a decision where you put Christ first in your life. As you listen to this, maybe God's speaking to you to be the kind of man or woman that would embrace Jesus Christ as your personal Savior. Let him be the one calling the shots. And if you're watching this or you're listening to this and you say, I've already done it, I've already done that, I'm already a believer, then let me challenge you. Are you living a life where you're standing up when everyone else is bowing down? Does your life exemplify someone who says no to what the flesh is calling them to, no to what everybody else is indulging in, when everybody else panics, when everybody else becomes greedy, when everybody else freaks out, when everybody else looks out only for themselves? Are you the kind of person who says, no, I'm not doing what comes naturally and easy that way. I'm going to do what God's called me to do, and I'm going to demonstrate love and compassion. I'm going to be generous when everybody else is being greedy. I'm going to be patient when everybody else is being extra moody or quick-tempered. I'm going to demonstrate a compassion when everybody else is ready to attack. I'm going to demonstrate that my trust doesn't come in my money or in my possessions when everybody else is saying, I got to get mine. If that's not true of you, then why don't you take a lesson from Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego today on what real bravery looks like, to be bold and courageous even when it doesn't make sense, even when it's not easy. Let's pray together this morning. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord God, thank you so much for everything you've given us. Thank you for the opportunity to know you and to follow after you, God. Thank you that you're the kind of God who would die for us. Lord, my prayers for the person who might be listening out there right now that needs to embrace a relationship with you. God, I pray for that person, that he or she would surrender their life, that right now in this moment they would confess their need for you, that they would admit that they've sinned. You said if we would just be honest enough to confess our sins, to say that we've screwed up, to admit that we've done wrong and that we can't fix it, God, you said if we would just own that and invite you to be the solution to our problems, that if we would trust you, that you would do that. Not only would you forgive us, but that you would save us. So God, I pray for the person out there that needs to do that right now in this moment. I pray that they would invite you in, that they would move out of the driver's seat, and that they would let you call the shots for their life. And God, I pray for the men and women, for the boys and girls that are listening to this message that need to be more bold, to be more brave, to not give in to a slow drift away from you, to not slowly go after what everybody else goes after, to not give in to the greed and to the selfishness, to the anger, God, to the lust, to the pride, to the jealousy, God, that we wouldn't be those kind of people, that we wouldn't pursue and act like everybody else does, but that, God, that there be something different, something unique about us. God, I pray that we would have the kind of heart, the kind of testimony that makes you proud, that makes you smile. We ask all of this in your precious and holy name. Amen. Thank you again for giving me a few moments of your time. I enjoyed this message. I love this story. There's so much more that we didn't get to unpack today. I would challenge you, go read Daniel 1 and chapters 1 and 3 and just get a little bit more of what I was talking about today. But know that if you made a decision, we would love to hear from you. Let us know that you've decided to go out and embrace Jesus Christ. We want to celebrate. We want to get you a Bible. We would be happy to mail that to you. That's free. We just want to give you a gift to get you started on your walk with him. Here's something else that I'd like to ask you to do. As we get ready to worship, we're going to sing a song that goes, it's written for today's message. So I think you're really going to love it. You can sing along, you can lift up your voice, you can just sit back and think about the lyrics. I'm asking that you would pray and ask God to give you something to do with today's message, that you would make real application. So it's very easy to nod your head along or go, oh yeah, I should do that, I should try this. It's a lot harder to put your money where your mouth is. It's a lot harder to let the rubber meet the road. So why don't today, while we play this next song, would you drop a comment or send us an email and let us know what it is that God's calling you to do, where you can step up and be more bold, where you can push back. You can say, hey, I need prayer for this. I want to push away from some of these temptations. You can maybe write something in the comments that says, man, I'm going to take this step and I'm going to love in this way. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to trust God more in this area. And I don't know how God spoke to you, but I'd love to hear from you. And you go, I don't want to be the first one to type. That's weird. I don't want to be that one to put something in the comments. Do it. There's something that empowers you when it goes from your head and you get it out there. So I'd encourage you to do that. I hope you enjoy this song. God bless you guys.
There's a grace when the heart is under fire. Another way when the walls are closing in. when I look at the space between where I used to be and this reckoning, I know I will never be alone. There was another in the fire standing next to me. There was another in the water holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding of how I've been set free, there is a cross that bears the burden where another died for me. There is another in the fire.
Now, in case you don't realize that, this song is about what Pastor Josh preached about this morning in Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And I think it's just an amazing picture of those three men in that fiery furnace and that fourth person in the fire. And that was God. That was God there with them. And I think sometimes we think Bible stories are just there for us to read, or, I don't know, nice story, but they're there to teach us and to teach us of truth about God. And I think it's a beautiful picture. Although those guys were in a literal fire, I hope none of us are in a literal fire this morning, but sometimes life feels like a fire and things happen and trials come and we just feel like we're in the furnace. But it's a great reminder, this story and this sermon this morning, is just a reminder that God is in there with us. He's that fourth person in the furnace. So just remember that this morning, that no matter what you're going through, God is right there with you in that fiery furnace.
All my debt left for dead beneath the water. I'm no longer a slave to my sin anymore. And should I fall in the space between what remains of me and this reckoning, either way I will bow to the things of this world. And I know I will never be alone. There is another in the fire standing next to me. There is another in the waters holding back the seas. Should I ever need reminding what power set me free? There is a grave that holds nobody. Now that power lives in me. There is another in the fire. Oh, 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 and I can see the light, and I can see the light in the darkness as the darkness bows to him. I can hear the roar in the heavens as the space between wasted. I can feel the ground shake beneath us as the prison walls cave in. Nothing stands between us. Nothing stands between
There is no other name but the name that is Jesus. He who was and still is, it will be through it all. So come what may in the space between all those things unseen and this reckoning, I know I will never be alone. I know I will never be alone. There'll be another in the fire standing next to me. There'll be another in the waters holding back the seas. Should I ever need reminding, or will you get to There'll be another in the fire, standing next to me. There'll be another in the water, holding back the sea. And should I ever need reminding how good you've been to me, I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be.
Thanks, guys, for worshiping with us and tuning in. Just want to tell you about a couple things. You already heard about some awesome stuff that we've been doing in our community. If you want to be a part of what we're doing as a church, both in our own community on Cape Cod and all over the world, you can do that by giving financially. There's tons of ways to do that. Go online to Harbor.Church.com/give. You can also text to give. Text any amount to 84321. Or you can do it the old-fashioned way. Send us a check in the mail at 957 Falmouth Road in Hyannis. Speaking of being a part of what we're doing at Harbor, some of you guys may have been to some of our Rooted Nights. It's just a time and an opportunity for us as a church family to get together, dig into our faith, dig into the Bible a little bit, get some more teaching, and talk about some stuff that's going on. So we're actually going to be doing one of those Rooted Nights coming up soon, so look out for some more details. I know it may not look like normal. Unfortunately, we can't be here in person, but we're still going to do it online and have some time to just get together, dig in, get, more rooted, as they say. Another way to get connected and to grow in your faith is connect groups. We've been having connect groups meeting over Zoom for the last couple months, but we're about to start up a new round, some new times, some new days. Some of these connect groups are going to be sermon-based, like the last round, but we're actually going to be having some new subject-based connect groups that are going to be awesome, and I know that you're going to want to be a part of it. So look out for more information coming up soon for that. Thanks for watching, you guys. We'll see you next week.